Good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. We are a keynote panel that are going to discuss investing in health tech and digital health with the focus on the next wave of Nordic innovation. My name is Kathrine Myhre, and I am the CEO of Norway Healthtech, the largest health cluster in Norway. And with me today, I have three excellent gentlemen. It's Patrik Subotsky, he's investment manager in Industrifonden, Stockholm-based. Klaus Stoeckemann, he's managing partner in Peppermint Venture Partners, based in Germany. And Andreas Lindblom, CEO of Society, also based in Stockholm. And I think we start with actually giving the word to all of you to say a few words about maybe who you are, but first of all, your venture firms and what phase you are investing in and basically looking for. Very short, please. Would you like to start, Patrik?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and delighted to be on this panel. So quickly about myself and Industrifonden. I've spent my entire career in the healthcare information and life sciences field. And actually, I have a big heart for health tech. So I was part of building up 2 startups and exiting those to US companies. So I've been on the operating side. For all of you in the audience, I know the journey, and it can be somewhat different from what you planned from the beginnings. So since 4 years, I'm on the fund of Industrifonden. We're the largest deep tech fund in the Nordics, with a balance sheet of about 600 million euros. And half of our funds we actually spend in life sciences, and health tech is a big chunk of that. So we were one of the first funds out to actually start investing in the digitalization journey in healthcare already some 7-8 years ago. And our sweet spot for investing would be Series A and onwards. So typically when companies have proof of principle of the product and started their journey to internationalize the company.
Thank you so much. Klaus, would you like to continue?
Yeah. So also very nice to be on that panel. So as mentioned, we are a German-based company based in Berlin, which is one of the hotspots of digital health in Germany. I'm doing now venture capital since 20 years. And since 5 years, we have a kind of focus on digitalization of healthcare. We started that in 2013 with first investments in 2014 in this space. And we are very excited that now all over Europe, initiatives on fostering digital health developments and digitization take place. We invest normally in A rounds. Sometimes we do seeds. That depends really how good the solution is. And we can invest up to 4 million on a single company. And indeed, we're looking for deal flow from the Nordic region.
Perfect. That's what we're looking for. Andreas, would you like to continue?
Sure. So thank you very much for being here today. It's a pleasure. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Society, and we're an investment network. We specialize in life science and health tech, so that's the only thing we invest in. We usually invest from 1 to 10 million euro per company per round. I guess that would make it like pre-Series A or Series A, depending on in which country you talk about it, of course. But yeah, so that's briefly about Society. And yeah.
Excellent. So as we already have touched upon, health tech and digital health technologies are now really starting to realize their potential. Great technologies really being tested out and are also out in the market. And so we're going to focus on the digital health and health tech part here. Also, the strategies of the governments, pan-Nordic, and I'm pretty sure, and I know actually also in Germany, are really also focusing on digital health. So how is this influencing the existing innovation? How do you see this is influencing the deal flow and yeah, basically the uptake of innovations and technologies as well? Patrik, would you like to start?
Happy to kick it off, absolutely, and happy to hear also Andreas and Klaus's comments on this, obviously. I mean, I look upon this, having also been in various parts of this ecosystem, at the startup side and the buyer side, at the research side, I think you need to look upon this as a broader ecosystem where there is a great interest to actually enhance and empower patients and drive patient outcomes. So I think there are all kinds of positive signs that has happened throughout the past decade. What I believe is of extra positive in the Nordics and potentially also in Germany is obviously that there is also a kind of bottom-up growth of a lot of IT competency and health and life science competency. And there's been strategic directions into those industries over decades. So I think there is, from a governmental policy, industry, talent, and educational and research point of view, there's always been a lot of effort going into this space. And now with the convergence between IT and healthcare, and the sweet spot of health tech, I think it's really happening. In the past 10 years, I've been looking at deal flow and companies in this space, both from an M&A perspective and now as an investor. It's really taken off from early ideas to companies that are scaling actually internationally. And as for the governmental support, I think that's been pivotal also for startups to try out and get early adoption and pilots going to found their product in research. So close possibility to collaborate with the researchers, but also to actually get catalyzing effects from grants and soft funding, which exists across the countries in the Nordics. So I think the environment has really strengthened. Now, I think we really need to build out these companies and showcase that they can scale, that the investors actually can get return on their funding. So still we haven't seen really the fruit of a lot of those growth of health tech companies as in the US, but it's looking really positive.
Good. Klaus, would you like to also elaborate on the question?
Yeah, like to do that. As Patrik mentioned, the last years, I think, were a real transformation for many of the countries, right? As you probably know, Germany was very slow in adopting any kind of digitization processes, from electronic healthcare record to your insurance card, where basically nothing was stored on. It still is not, by the way. It may change next year. But more important, in the startup ecosystem, it was very difficult for startups to get to payers and get reimbursement. When we did start investing, we had to negotiate with each single payer a contract for a solution called selective contracts, and that was very, very exhausting for startups, and also did limit some of our companies to scale at all, right? When we did an investment in Kathrine, which is a digital therapy for lazy eye, the company went to 40 different health insurance companies before they then finally got a couple of them signed up. And that the good thing is that this is now going to change. Last year, as maybe the audience also know, and feel free to come to Germany, by the way, there was an implementation of a so-called Digital Care Act, which for the first time allows startups with their solutions to enter the German market. It need to be MDR certified or medical device certified products up to class 2A. It can't be 2B and 3. And then you can apply at the authorities through a fast track process, that's the name. And then if you are fulfilling the certain criteria, you can get listed for 1 year and obtain reimbursement for 1 year. In that year, then you have to prove utility and meaningfulness, let's call it this way, for your solution, and then you can get into a global reimbursement in Germany. And this actually has opened up the enthusiasm of all startups in that space to stay in Germany, to work through Germany, and also bringing people from outside Germany to enter Germany because of this potentially reimbursement. And I think that is only an example for Germany, and I guess other countries as France, etc., have started to reimburse telemedical solutions, telemedicine. And I think we are at the edge now actually to really get it done. And then I think Europe has not to hide behind the US guys.
Thank you, Klaus. Andreas, do you also have perspectives on this?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to echo Patrik and Klaus that of course we see a very good growth in the ecosystem, partly due to the government strategies. One should also, I think that not all strategies are good, but I think it's a challenge for anyone, including the government, when they decide upon which actions to take to stimulate growth. I think that the things that they do to ease for the health tech companies trying to enter the healthcare sector, that is of particular interest, at least to us, because there we see that since it is a very regulated and complex market in terms of reimbursements and so on, it's anything they can do there to in terms of unified APIs to easier reimbursement models. That's of course is very beneficial, but also a challenge, of course.
You based Stockholm, Germany, and I'm sitting in Oslo right now, and I can confirm that what the government do or what they do not do is actually of very, very big importance here in Norway as well. And as far as I've seen from Denmark, I think they've been, seems like they've been, I mean, the government as well has really had a big focus on this, which is also making the market actually picking up, which is of course important both for the companies and for the investors as well. So, but it seems like there's things that we can learn across the different countries here actually, so that the different governments could actually listen into each other as well and learning from each other. Just a comment from my side, to the Norwegian ones at least. So, but anyway, so it has been picking up a lot, but how quickly do you think the Nordic health tech innovation growth would be? Is it matching medtech and biotech and pharma? What are I know, Patrik, you've done some, you have quite a new report. What is that report telling you or telling us?
Yeah, so happy to give a bit of a highlight from that. Otherwise, you could download it from our company website to get its full details. But every year now for 5 years, we've done a funding report across life science, and that also include the kind of tech applications into healthcare. And actually, if you look over the past 5 years, it's interesting because I think all of us can conclude that the number of companies that are and entrepreneurs that are going into healthcare and building technology applications there has grown enormously. And there's a great interest coming both from technology and life sciences specialists into this field. And if you look at mere facts on private funding that goes into this area, actually health tech in the past 5 years has overtaken biotech in numbers of euros. So in the past 5 years, approximately 300 million euros has gone into health tech companies, whereas it's shy to 280 million euros in biotech. That obviously takes out the public funding, and obviously the stock markets across Nordics, particularly in Stockholm, Nasdaq, has been very vibrant for many types of life science companies. But only for private investing, which I think we represent, it's overtaking biotech. So that concludes really that this is a force that's here to stay, we believe. And also we see the convergence between these segments. But if you look at medtech and DX, diagnostics, it's much lower. So it's in the 100 millions and the 25 million euros over the past 5 years. Also, if you look at number of deals, the past 5 years, we have some 150 cases that have done fundraisings in health tech, whereas it's below 100 in biotech. So these are just early signs that this is a force that's coming, and I foresee with our fund and also looking at our deal flow that this will continue.
So do you see the same signs, Andreas and Klaus as well? Andreas first.
No, yeah, I agree that I would say in general that the health tech investments or funding is growing and maturing. So I think if one looks globally, if I remember correctly, that in 2019 it was almost as much going into health tech as in 2018. It's around 7.5 to 8 billion US globally. But the deals are fewer but larger, so very strong sign of a maturing market in that sense. So definitely. But then also if you speak about the there's one thing looking at the actual funding going into the health tech sector. The other is also the successes, as Patrik mentioned earlier, that maybe we haven't seen so many successes yet, and that could be due to a number of reasons, of course. So the other one would be the expertise or the experience from the of the actual team. So maybe that is maybe not on par with some medtech and biotech areas in the Nordic. Just a guess, but educated guess, hopefully, on my end.
So Klaus, Germany, do you see the same tendency there? I mean, Germany is very well known for medtech and diagnostics for many years, right? But it's also the digital picking up with regards to how much funding that is actually going into the companies.
Yeah, but maybe let me first talk about Nordic. We have seen a shift from heavily loaded medtech deal flow across the Nordic region, carving out pharma for a moment. And do see that there is a picking up on the digital side constantly. And I think that would mirror actually the situation in Germany. While Germany indeed is a kind of medtech country, legislation and reimbursement again are really some tough cookies for some startups. And the digital space seems to be much more open for entrepreneurs to develop a solution and do something with it. I mean, we have not talked about validation of digital health product, and that's not the topic of the panel. But at the end of the day, that's all about that you clinical or medical or in one or the other way have validated your product. So I would confirm that the shift in digital health is visible, right? And new funds entries coming into the market, which have never done venture capital, by the way. Let's see how that's going to work. But money is there for digital health, and with the Digital Care Act, this basically has stimulated people to say, well, we have now in Germany to be there, and that's a reason why I think you see quite a lot of money around.
Good. Andreas, you were touching upon reasons for why digital health actually is picking up. And I would say that COVID-19, which we are still in the middle of, at least we have seen in Norway that digital health companies really, they provide solutions for a lot of the challenges. And that also makes it very much more interesting also for the investors. So that might be one cause of why it's actually picking up. And yeah, so what's your thinking around the COVID-19 having a clear challenge and the future as well?
Okay, so of course, as you say, there's been a tremendous success, sadly in a sense, for some of these health tech companies, especially in terms of remote GP consultation and telemedicine and others. So, but the good side, of course, is that a lot of healthcare players have been forced to adopt these new technologies and health tech solutions. So I definitely, it's basically they are showing that it's needed. I think one should also keep in mind that, of course, a lot of healthcare providers, they are also looking maybe for the tech solutions of their own, so they don't necessarily need to go to a health tech provider or health tech startup to deliver their service. They might already have all the client flow and everything, and they know the reimbursement systems from in and outside. So they just some of these players, they just need a technology to be able to deliver service in a more efficient or cost efficient way. So it's not only beneficial to the health tech sector, but definitely it's been a surge in those in some of these fields.
Any other that would like to comment on that one, Patrik? A
Yeah.
clear challenge, is it actually scaling the industry?
No, yeah, just to comment upon Andreas, what Andreas was saying, I completely agree. And I mean, we could absolutely look at COVID-19 right now, and I'm a true believer that this will accelerate digitalization behaviors by 3-4 years already in this process. And obviously in our portfolio, we are invested in a few provider-facing technologies that are really having tailwinds at this time, with remote care platforms such as Norway, for instance, providing care platform for severe respiratory patients who basically cannot go to healthcare out of risk of being admitted to getting COVID-19. But I think probably should look at more of a perspective of, these are decades of accelerating aspects. And if you look at the Nordics, you have universal adaptation of electronic medical records, which happened the first countries out in the world. So already since the 80s, we are the first to adopt EMRs. The second piece I think I always speak to, and also having built companies myself around this, is that the host of data that I always have been there. Since the 50s, we've been like squirrels collecting data on a patient level basis, with health registries that are governed by health authorities to disease-specific registries. And that is an absolute goldmine if you want to build AI, for instance, or if you want to build evidence related to your health tech products. So I think we probably need to have a perspective that goes decades back, and then the accelerating aspect, which absolutely happens. First, to me, comes to mind telemedicine. So Sweden was first out to really go for reimbursement. We did see Kry, MinDoctor, and these companies driving the acceleration of digitalization behavior in healthcare. Now we see deeper and more sophisticated solutions being developed. And these will be the kind of the second wave beyond the generic telemedicine products or services. But I think still, for me and us as an investor, it is a difficulty. And to your point, Klaus, we are managing 28 countries. The larger economies have very different regulatory pathways in certain senses, or at least from a kind of compliance perspective and data aspects, and reimbursement pathways are very different. So scaling, you need to look upon various factors. I mean, technology-wise, but also commercially. And I think we spend a lot of time on how you commercially actually can go about and efficiently build and scale through partners, with yourself, and other means. And that we haven't seen globally, to be honest. Not even the merger that happens now between Teladoc and Livongo. It's very much a US play. So we haven't seen any company scaling globally. So there is no Facebook or such tech companies in health tech that has made it globally. So that I'm very excited about when we will see that. And we will learn how companies actually go about their business models, how they partner, how they tie into health systems in a wise way. So we have a lot to learn, and the companies will have to be very nimble and adaptive, I think, to manage the scale.
Which leads me to the next type of a part of questions. So do you all see good enough and large enough deal flows of great companies? And also selection criteria. Is it easy to select them? How can we grow the deal flow? And also the ecosystem of investors. Do you have co-investors to invest with, to syndicate with? How can we deal with this one? But maybe starting with the deal flow. And Klaus, do you have a large enough and interesting enough? And maybe interesting enough is the key question here. Deal flows.
Well, I mean, we tend to work theme-based, coming from medtech, right? And while we try to carry on with a theme-based approach, we not looking to every vertical, if you like, or horizontal. If you take the vertical, be digital health, and you have horizontals, which would be disease areas. So, but in certain areas like cardiology, ophthalmology, as an example, mental health, we see quite a decent amount of deal flow globally. And the problem for us to come to an investment decision is we are very brutal on competitive intelligence. So if we benchmark a German case against the Israeli one or an Iceland one, right, and the Iceland one is the best one, then we would invest in Iceland, right, and not in Germany. And having said that, what I want to say with that is that you have to really benchmark these cases, right? We are a private investor. The only reason why we invest is to develop interesting products and at the end of the day, bring them to the market. For us, the deal flow is not really a problem. The problem is rather syndication and co-investors, because while you have a couple of digital health investors emerging, and our sweet spot is actually software and hardware combinations, right? And that's something where you lose immediately 60–70% of the VCs because they just want to do software models, right? So therefore, if you would ask me, do we have enough syndication partners? I would say no, not for our sweet spot, but as Patrik mentioned, the conversion of ICT and health, you find tons of ICT investors now entering digital health, right? And I think that's good for the startups, but I think it's also dangerous because healthcare is ticking differently compared to ICT.
Both Andreas and Patrik, you're nodding. Patrik, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, starting off with the deal flow, I think I echo you, Klaus. I mean, I think our take to the health tech vertical is really, you know, we want to see more complex solutions, and we want to go for those teams that really want to build sustainable, validated outcomes imprints with patients. So we probably wouldn't back the next or the 15th telemedicine platform, but rather want to see teams with stamina that want to build something deeper. So that's a little bit the heritage where we come from, and I think that resonates partly with our portfolio in health tech as well. Of course, we want to see more companies, and we want to see bolder companies. I think a lot of companies, build out a very beautiful vision for the local environment, but it's a completely different story to build out a product and also go to market and ways to grow your company to attract multiple markets. And I think there we spend a lot of time to understand them entrepreneurs, understand the product, understand the plans, and see how realizable they are. And in the local Nordic setting, I would say one of the asks to your entrepreneurs in the audience is really go bold, try and build out your plans, and go to the markets where you think you have the biggest opportunity, rather than the adjacent country or the adjacent county council even in healthcare systems. So I think that's constantly a discussion we have. Obviously, we also want to make sure that it fits with our sweet spot, and we typically try and back companies when they have a product ready, they have certain traction, they have certain validation of the product that it actually works in patients. But to Klaus's point, I think what we struggle a lot with, and we see the portfolio companies struggle a lot with, we have invested in, is that the ecosystem is emerging. So in the US, you have a number of health tech specific funds, but in Europe, you have kind of a mishmash of either coming from the tech side, taking a firm view and the vertical health, or life science investors allowing in their strategy to actually invest in digital means. And this is happening right now. And I think over the coming years, we will see more specialized investors who actually understand the health system, understand the tick of the system, that it takes stamina to invest in this. Things doesn't take off as an app facing consumers only if you're investing in, or if you're building something facing pharma or providers, which we tend to focus on. So I think this is just happening now, but it's definitely something that portfolio companies and entrepreneurs will have to spend a lot of time on. So that's another aspect we look at in deal flow. Can these companies actually raise funds? Do they have the stamina and skill sets to be on the road and do this? And now in the midst of COVID, that's obviously a challenge for everybody. But actually it represents an opportunity as well, because funds are now looking easily through digital means over many markets. Closing deals on those is obviously a tricky one, but I think we will see more and more hires as well as transactions being done fully digitally. So I'm actually positive that the ecosystem will accelerate even, because you will start looking at global deal flow and outside of your typical home market. But this is still a tough nut, and I think it will take time for companies to, investment companies to learn how to invest in health tech, because it's different from other tech verticals and it's different from biotech.
So go bold is a very clear message to the companies, but also to Andreas. So what can investors do? I mean, yes, we do have investors that are investing in the digital, and you have the traditional doing biotech, medtech, and now we're really starting to see we need the conversion here and the knowledge and the background. Do you have any solutions for this, Andreas? How do we make sure that the right investors actually syndicate so that also the investment community have the right competence? That's part of the question, right? And challenge, as far as I understand, Patrik and Klaus?
Yeah, so I think that as Klaus and Patrik mentioned, a lot of tech VCs are entering the digital health because they are similar in many, but not all things. So many of their models and how they do their due diligence and evaluate these companies are similar, but as has come up many times now, it's a more complex market in the healthcare sector. So I think, I mean, there is always syndication going on and between venture capital firms globally, I would say, for all very not all companies, of course, but the ones that are very attractive to investors. So I think what can be done, it's more of a increased communication between investors using their network and most likely more digital tools to find each other to discuss more potential deal flow. And for example, since we invest both in pharma, biotech, and medtech and digital health, some of our investors they turn to us, or some VCs turn to us if they need like a second opinion or due diligence on a company that's partly health tech, but partly they might have a more hardware component or a biotech component. They usually turn to us and ask us what we think about it, and I think that's a good way forward. And of course, we do the same. So just reach out to the ones that have the VCs or other investors that have this specific knowledge.
Yeah. So I would like to use the opportunity also to give credit to LSX, because LSX is actually, you are providing a platform for both investors to meet other investors, but also, of course, for investors to meet companies and companies to meet investors. We are touching upon digital platforms. Yeah. So, any wishes for how to further build out the network also across borders? And today, are you investing with investors in UK and other countries, or are you basically knowing the investors in your own area? Or what about US, pan-European, Asia? and anything the ecosystem could do in order to actually grow the network of investors. So just a comment from the Norwegian side, typically it's typically men investing. In Norway, we have a focus on having more female investors. Actually, there's a campaign going on right now on having She Invests. Actually, yeah, that's one thing. But also, typically you invest with those you know from before, which is fully understandable. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you open up your network and learn new things. So, comments around this? What would you want in order to really build a good and future-oriented platforms?
So I can just comment briefly, since that is what we are trying to do at Society, at least. So we are a digital investment platform and a network. So that's basically what we do. So we syndicate by default, and the investors part of the network, so to speak, is venture capital firms, family offices, and high net worth individuals interested in investing in life science and digital health. So from our end, I mean, we are constantly reaching out to new investors to try to build a stronger network to be able to fund the potential successful companies of the future in the health tech sector.
Yeah. And both Klaus and Patrik, you're nodding, so I guess you fully agree on this one. So that's something we can work on. We have a few minutes left, and I think we really need to touch upon how do you pick the future winners, and what are the key ingredients for success? That is something that the companies and the CEOs of the companies are really interested in knowing from you. So Klaus, would you like to start?
Well, I mean, this is more textbook things, right? What we have read before in books about entrepreneurship and kind of, people who are done many startups before. So what we are actually, to be honest, we're coming from a problem, from a medical problem. And then we, fortunately or unfortunately, end up to really investigating whether the solution we get on our table is really making a difference. Of course, we will look for who is presenting that, and is he bold? I mean, I like that from Patrik. Is he bold enough to build a solution which is not only for Germany, but for Europe or for globally? So it is a classical VC kind of rules you basically apply also for digital health entrepreneurs coming to us, right? So, but the medical validation, the meaningfulness of the solution under a competitive investigation is for us actually a very, very important thing. Of course, if the person who comes to us is a very difficult one, then it adds to the investment decision. But we're starting always with a medical solution and the idea. Of course, we did one investment where a founder came without. He had a drawing of a catheter, right? That was a medical device. He has nothing else, and we did invest in him. That is a very exceptional thing. Meanwhile, the catheter is in the clinic, but it took a bit longer than we have expected. So it is really, at the end of the day, normal measures we apply for making an investment decision. The only thing I want to say which is different is we would only do it when the persons are willing to engage in the US.
Yeah, and obviously because US being one of the largest markets, right? And complicated. Yeah.
Well, it's complicated, but it's also not complicated. I mean, Patrik mentioned Livongo. It's a crazy, fascinating story, right? What you can do with a blood glucose meter, which is connected. Let's simplify it. It's of course much more, but now, and then now you get acquired with at 18 billion, 65 times revenue. This is what you need to, let's say, dream on to build interesting digital startups.
Patrik.
Yeah, I mean, I think we share a lot of the commonalities here with Klaus's comment. I think we are, I mean, if you look at the entire health tech spectrum, I mean, you have a lot of consumer-oriented apps. And I probably should say straight up that we typically wouldn't be the go-to type of investor for those type of ventures, but rather those that really want to strive and build evidence and drive outcomes with patients. So we would rather look at more complex solutions that face providers or pharma. And that also rhymes with our portfolio. But I think we go to, product. Does it really solve a problem? And does it really drive outcomes? Because ultimately, I come from a geeky research background looking at health economics and epidemiology. The shortcuts for health tech companies is gone. You need to prove to regulators and payers these days that it's bang for the buck, that your solution actually provides meaningful differences to the health system, to the patient or the consumer. So for us, it's got to be in the genes of an entrepreneur and the product that you build. So we look closely at that, and we diligently look that that's kind of planned out, but also that there are, early signs of evidence that the product has shown. Then I think going back to team, I mean, you cannot state enough. I think in health tech, we don't, at least in Europe, we don't have the serial entrepreneurs yet. If you look at other tech verticals. So we cannot only back the ones that have done it before and hope, or, likelihood that they will succeed again. These are often first-time entrepreneurs, often young. So they will need to do all the mistakes that you do. And I've done them myself. But these individuals need to have the stamina, need to have the absolute, brutalness that they want to do it. They want to build the next gen Livongo or Teladoc company. And that doesn't mean that for us that they need to go to the US. That's a big opportunity. And evidently for our portfolio, most of them are already in the US market. Equally, we look at South America, we look at Asia as absolute interesting markets. Combinostics, neurogenerative medicine platform we invested into, are doing it in Japan right now, looking into the Asian countries through partnerships. So we would also look closely at how can you actually get that at scale with your technology across continents here. And then I think the scalability aspect, we will also spend a lot of time on. So it's tough, I think, to play the venture game, but once we back our companies, we stay very close to them and we are very active and we make the most out of our networks to really ensure that these teams actually can succeed. Because it takes a lot of implementation, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of capital. So you need to do this jointly with other investors and partners. And I think we are a minority investor, and I think we all share that. So we cannot dictate what these companies will do. We will be one of the parties trying to ensure at the early stage that these companies make it to a certain level to get the next funding or partners or close proximity to clients.
Andreas?
Well, so I think Patrik and Klaus have summarized quite a lot of how they look at companies and so on, how they select winners. So and of course it's always a lot of due diligence and a lot of questions to be asked and answered. But I would say that many of us at Society, we have a background as life science entrepreneurs, and many of us have been in finance as well. So, but we are still very humble in the sense that trying to pick a winner is very hard. So basically our way is trying to rule out the not so potential winners. So we do it the other way, basically. So we try to just exclude as many as possible, and the few that remains, those are the ones that we select from. So, and then we yeah.
Yeah. So maybe a last question, if there's a minute or two left. Nordics. We started out focusing on the Nordics, and we represent the Nordics and Germany as well, which is very close to the Nordics. So is there an edge in the Nordics when it comes to digital health and technology? And what I also see, and I'm just very short, we have a lot of medtech companies. What we struggle with is actually having them to make a digital strategy. They're all fetching data, but what are they going to do with the data? So one short thing, how do we move forward? Very quick. Patrik?
Well, I think, I mean, I definitely believe that the region has a lot to offer, not only to the patients and the health systems locally, but also globally to build out companies. I think we have early signs of this in the telemedicine space, in the digital therapeutic space. So there's good signals that there will come a lot of good technologies that can be applied globally out of the Nordics. But I think it will take a lot of more stamina. There are no quick fixes in this market. So you better plan for a 10, 15 years journey rather than a 3 to 5 years journey. And I think you also need to be very nimble. As I go back to the nimbleness, Livongo, Teladoc haven't fixed their business model yet. So let's face it, we need to be humble about how you actually can explore the market and how you can drive revenues and adoption and use of your technology. And these teams that pull it off, they will need to be very humble and agile to this, because it will be different across markets, and you will learn over the journey. You will probably pivot a few times to become that successful company. The other aspect is really, to me, I mean, we're in the early stage investing in this, but to me, I think the sustainable long-term effects that I believe are there with the digitalization in healthcare, that I'm really looking forward to. So the 2.0 of healthcare organizations, of big medtech, of tech companies that come into this area, diagnostics companies that face this. So I'm also very curious about the takers of these early stage companies and how they will embrace and develop those technologies further, because I think we're constantly only looking at the early stages. But to me, if we are going to get some winners down the line, we need to prove not only for our investments, but also long term that these technologies actually delivers the promise they made from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that takes decades. That's not a quick fix.
Yeah. Thank you so much. By that, we need to close the session. 45 minutes is up, and I would like to say very big thank you to Patrik from Industrifonden, Klaus from Peppermint Venture, and to Andreas from Society, and to LSX for hosting this session. Thank you so much. And also, I know all of you are very much interested in actually getting contacted by companies. So for the companies to know, please reach out to these guys. Thank you so much.